Hey everyone, and welcome to another edition of Fun with Flags. I'm your friendly neighborhood soda, joined as always by my friend 50 Shades of Geek. How are you doing?
Fine, we haven't done this in a while.
Yeah, we have, and that's one of the issues when there's like almost 12 hours separating between us. It's really hard to schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah. But for those who don't know, this is the show Fun with Flags, where I tell 50 about things from my side of the world, and he tells me about things from his side of the world. But before we get into that, I just want to pay respects to the late great Carl Weathers, who passed away the day before we were recording this episode. For those who who know me, they know how much the Rocky series, Rocky and Creed, are an integral part of my life, and a lot of that has to do with Carl Weathers' portrayal as Apollo Creed. So when he passed away, it hit me pretty hard. Because yeah, he's one of the first big Rocky actors to die. Wow, just realized that. Well, Burt Young passed away recently, but I mean, like, he was more of a supporting character. The one who played Paulie. And of course, Burgess Meredith died. But to me, like, the big three are Rocky, Apollo, and Adrian.
Adrian!
But yeah, of course, not only was he known for Rocky, he was also known for his role in Predator, and for those who love comedy, for Happy Gilmore. You know, it's all in the hips.
And
the Mandalorian. Yeah, Mandalorian, which is what brought him back into the pop culture in recent times. Yeah.
And was there something else he did recently other than Mando, or am I just confusing?
He might have. I'm just not sure. But anyways, I just want to give a special shout out to Apollo Creed, to
he's
Carl
not a character for you.
Yeah, So shout out to Carl Weathers, man. Thank you very much for all the memories. Thank you very much for playing Apollo, because Rocky wouldn't have worked without you. All right. So on to happier notes. So my topic for today. So we're recording this on February 3rd, which is the date of the latest edition of the NHL All-Star Game. So I figured, why not go into somewhat of a history of the NHL All-Star Game. Now, 50, I know you don't follow sports, but do you know what the concept of an all-star team is?
I have zero idea.
Okay, so generally the concept of an
all-star team.
Generally the concept of an all-star team in terms of sports is when you take the best players from every team and you put them together on one. That's what it is.
And that specific team plays what type of game?
So that logic counts for basketball, baseball, hockey. Like, that's just
that's not what I'm asking. Like, do you save them for like the Olympics?
So yes. So you do that for the All-Star Game. So you get players, certainly, like nowadays it's fan voted, so they choose who's participating. And most often than not, they will be separated. I'll get into it in detail, but they're separated into two teams who face off against each other. Same thing how the Olympics are made. It's the best players from every country, right? Which is also a fancy All-Star team. And actually, pretty good news. The NHL announced yesterday that they are returning to the Olympics for 2026, which is pretty cool.
So there's like a full-on league of just All-Star games?
No. So the All-Star Game is a special thing. It's an exhibition match onto itself.
Okay, with no stakes on like rankings or whatever.
No stakes, no rankings. Sometimes they've added they like the past number of years they've changed it, so like at one point it was the winning team that would get like I think $1 million each person to go to their own charity or some of that. This year, the way they did it, instead of like all the players participating, they got together for the skills competition. They just got like 12 of those players participating in the All-Star Game, and they all competed in a bunch of events for $1 million prize. It was actually pretty fun last night. But I'm actually not going to be talking much about the All-Star Game, not the All-Star Game, the skills competition, because while it is a lot of fun to watch, it doesn't necessarily make it. It's not exactly the most exciting event most of the time. So let's hop right into it. So the first official NHL All-Star Game was held during the 1947-48 season. However, prior to that, there have been several occasions where benefit games and All-Star games were played. So I'm going to touch on 4 of them first. So the first NHL All-Star Game in ice hockey predates the NHL. It was played on January 2nd, 1908, before 3,500 fans at the Montreal Arena between the Montreal Wanderers and a team of all-star players for the teams of the Western Amateur Hockey Association. It was held in memory of Wanderers player Hod Stewart, who had drowned 3 months after the Wanderers won the Stanley Cup in 1907. The proceeds of that game, over $2,000, went to Stewart's family.
And oh, the days where promenade seats were just $1.
Right? Yeah, I've got programs. Some of the pictures are programs and shit, so you'll see some stuff. Okay, so this next one is actually probably the most detailed one I'm going to go into because there is a specific story behind it. On December 12th, 1933, Maple Leafs player King Clancy upended Boston defenseman Eddie Shore with a hard check as the latter player rushed up the ice. Angry, dazed, and thinking he was going after Clancy, Shore rushed at Maple Leafs Garnet Ace Bailey, intent on revenge. He hit Bailey hard from the side, sending the stricken player flying through the air. Bailey struck the ice head first and lapsed into convulsions. Furious, referee Red Horner asked Shore what he was doing, and when met with only a smile in response, he knocked Eddie Shore out with a punch. Sorry, not a referee, Toronto player. Both players were carried in the offside.
Eddie Shore sounds familiar. Have we talked about him already? Eddie Shore, that name sounds familiar. Did we talk about him in another episode?
It's possible. He's a legend of early day hockey for sure. Not always for good. Both players were carried off the ice, where Shore first regained consciousness. He was able to reach Bailey, who briefly regained consciousness himself and attempted to apologize. Bailey was able to respond with, "It's all part of the game," before again passing out. As Maple Leafs owner Conn Smythe attempted to reach his team's dressing room to find out the status of Bailey, he was accosted by angry Bruin fans. At the time, the visitors' dressing room was on the main concourse before entering the arena, one of whom accused Bailey of faking his injury. An angry Smythe punched the fan in the mouth and was later charged with assault.
As you would expect.
Yep. Bailey was rushed to the hospital in Boston with a fractured skull, where neurosurgeons worked through the night to save his life. His injuries were so severe that doctors gave him only hours to live. Distraught over his son's injuries, Bailey's father boarded a train bound for Boston carrying a revolver, telling everyone he met of his intent to kill Shore. When Smythe found out about this, he contacted his assistant general manager, Frank Selke, for help. Selke got in touch with a friend of his who worked in the Boston police, who met Bailey's father at the hotel and talked the man out of his plan before returning him to Toronto. Authorities in Boston made it known that they intended to charge Shore with manslaughter if the player died. Bailey held on, though his life hung in the balance for several days. Following several surgeries, doctors eventually found reason to hope Bailey would survive. He amazed observers by showing a steady recovery, and by mid-January was well enough to be transferred home to Toronto. The NHL quickly absolved the referees of blame, while Shore protested that he was in a dazed state and not conscious of his actions at the time. League president Frank Calder suspended Horner, the Maple Leafs player, until January 1st, 1934, a period of 6 games, and Shore indefinitely for their roles in the incident. When he was assured that Bailey would survive, Calder set Shore's suspension at 16 games. Bailey lived for almost 60 more years, but his playing career was over. As a benefit for Bailey and his family, the NHL held its first ever All-Star Games, true All-Star game on February 14th, 1934. The game was held at Madison Square Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto, during which Bailey's number 6 uniform was retired by the Leafs. It was the first number to be retired in NHL history. The game saw the Leafs battle against an all-star team made of players from the other 7 teams, which the Leafs won 7-3. One of the more memorable moments before the game was when Bailey presented Shore with his all-star jersey, showing to the public that Bailey had clearly forgiven him for his actions. Bailey also presented a trophy to NHL President Frank Calder before the game in the hope that the trophy would go to the winner of an annual All-Star game for the benefit of injured players. That's going to be the longest one. And like you see, there's a reason why it's a long one. There's a big story behind it.
There's a lot of lead up.
Very much. All right, so the next one. Howie Morenz was one of which I'm pretty sure I've talked about before. Howie Morenz was one of the NHL superstars of the 1930s. However, his career and eventually life ended in a game between his Montreal Canadiens and the Chicago Blackhawks on January 28th, 1937, at the Montreal Forum. In that game, Morenz was checked by Chicago player Earl Seibert into the boards in what seemed like a normal hit. However, as the boards were made of wood at the time, Morenz's leg shattered in 5 separate locations above the ankle. He was carried off the ice on a stretcher to a hospital where he would stay for 4.5 weeks until his death from a heart attack.
Ooh.
Yeah, some say it was blood clots. A lot of people, some others say it was because of a broken heart because he couldn't play again. At one time, one visitor noted that it was as if a party was being held inside Marenz's hospital room, complete with whiskey and beer. Marenz died on March 8th the same year from, as teammate Aurel Joliat put it, a broken heart. Marenz suffered a heart attack the night before. Marenz's number 7 sweater, which had been hanging in its usual stall while he was in the hospital, was finally retired for good. While Marenz was in the hospital, plans for a game for Marenz's benefit was already underway. However, the game was not as successful as Bailey's game, partially because it took place many months after Marenz's passing on November 3rd at the Forum, and partially because Marenz had not survived. The game saw 2 All-Star teams, the first being a team of stars from the Canadiens and the Montreal Maroons, the second being an All-Star team made of players from the other teams, with the latter team winning 6-5.
So I thought what do you call them? The hockey sticks, hockey rod. They're not made of wood anymore.
The boards. He said the boards were made of wood.
Board?
The boards are. I'm actually not sure what they're made out of now, but it's definitely not wood. Sticks, not. They're not as popular to be made of wood nowadays. Most of the time, they're composite, which is a weird material. It's very rare you'll find a player using a wood stick nowadays.
But what's the board? The blocking thing?
The boards. So the boards is what separates the fans from the players. Is what it surrounds the ice.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. On August 25th, 1939, Babe Siebert, a Montreal Canadian who had just retired from play and had been named head coach, drowned in Lake Huron.
What is happening with these people?
This is the last one like this, okay? To benefit his family, the Canadiens and the Montreal Maroons organized a benefit held on October 29th at the Montreal Forum. 6,000 fans attended a game between the Canadiens and the NHL All-Stars, raising $15,000 Canadian, or $275,844 in 2021 dollars for Siebert's family. The All-Stars won the game 5-2. All right, the first game of the annual tradition, the first official NHL All-Star game, will be played in Maple Leaf Gardens on October 13th, 1947. The format of the All-Star game, which remained the same with 2 exceptions until 1967-68, called for the defending Stanley Cup champions to play against a selection of players from the other 5 teams. For the first year, the All-Stars were a team composed of the first and second NHL All-Star teams, not to be confused with a different All-Star team. So what this is where it gets a little confusing when you use the word term All-Star. So you've got like the All-Star team that plays once a year in the middle of the season, whatever. But at the end of the year, there's also what's known as the first and second All-Star teams. And those are players throughout the year who have been the best at their position. And they are just, it's just like, these are the top 10 elite. So the first All-Star, that's what that is. So for this first.
And so there's one game a year then?
One All-Star game a year, yeah. And it's usually in the middle of the season nowadays.
Okay. That's
why right now it's today, February 3rd. And the season doesn't end until April. Okay, so for the first year, the All-Stars were a team composed of the first and second All-Star teams, which I just explained to you, as well as 3 players from the New York Rangers and 1 each from the Detroit Red Wings and the Chicago Blackhawks. Although the All-Star game called for the defending Cup champions to host it, the game was held in Chicago Stadium in its second year as a consequence of the negotiations that set up the first game, whatever that means. Also, as a peculiarity as a result of the scheduling, the game was held not before the season started, as was the case before. It would be for almost 20 years following this game, but 3 weeks into the season. Like the year before, players from the first and second NHL All-Star teams were automatically awarded spots on the All-Star game rosters. Exception with Leafs goaltender Turk Broda, having won the Cup, played for the Leafs instead. With the rest of the All-Stars being assembled so that each team was represented with at least 3 players on the All-Stars. As for the game itself, the All-Stars had won 3-1, with all scoring coming in the second period. The defending Stanley Cup champions would win their first NHL All-Star game in 1950 by a 7-1 margin, thanks to Detroit's production line and the fact that 5 of the first and second NHL All-Star teams were Red Wings. Because of the one-sidedness of the game, many fans and hockey insiders considered options on how to make the All-Star game more balanced, including one where the All-Star game was eliminated altogether in favor of a best-of-9 Stanley Cup Finals, with the proceeds of 2 of the games going to the Players' Pension Fund and which saw Canadian teams versus American teams format, a somewhat flawed concept in that nearly all NHL players of that era, whether playing for teams represented American or Canadian cities, were Canadian. Ultimately, the fifth NHL All-Star Game saw the first All-Star team battle the second, with the players filling out the first team being from American teams and the second team being filled out with either Hab or Leaf players, so Canadian teams. The game ended in a 2-2 tie, leaving many fans upset for the second straight year. The same format of first versus second, with the first team being augmented by players from American teams and second from Canadian teams, continued the next year, but the sixth NHL All-Star Game proved to be 60 minutes of boring hockey as the team skated to a 1-1 tie. Criticisms of this new format, as well as the boring hockey, was what made the NHL revert the format of the All-Star Game to its original incarnation. Some of the criticisms included the fact that teammates often opposed each other in the All-Star Game under the new format, and some stated that the early date of the game was detrimental to the exposure of the NHL in the States, being held at the same time as the World Series and the NFL season. In what would later become a reality, Toronto Star columnist Red Burnett suggested that the game should be played mid-season and that fans should choose their starting lineup, a system which had long been in use in the States with regard to Major League Baseball. And yes, that is what they do now.
So, as someone who doesn't understand hockey, or rather doesn't watch hockey,
51.
to someone who does, okay? Yeah. Can hockey be boring to you?
Fuck no.
So that's why, I don't know if you heard, but I laughed at the term
boring hockey. Nowadays, not so much. Back in the day, you could easily be considered a hockey game boring. Just because there wasn't any of the flash you get with players nowadays. They weren't fast. They weren't well-conditioned. They were just regular schmucks like us. While great players, there was a lot more fighting. And yeah, it was easier for a hockey game to be boring back then.
Okay.
Nowadays, not so much. The game was moved from the start of the season to mid-season in the 1966-67 season as part of the first move to promote the NHL to 6 new cities which would have their own teams in October of 1967. Because of the move to mid-season, the method of player selection for the All-Stars, largely unchanged for 20 years, was much scrutinized, as playing the All-Star game mid-season meant that the first and second All-Star teams were decided almost a full year before the game itself, and that by mid-season, the Cup winners were a vastly different team from the team that had won the Cup some 8 or 9 months before. The mid-season move also meant that rookies with astounding first years, such as Bobby Orr, would be shut out of the game even if they deserved a spot on the All-Stars. So this is the 1967 one. The 21st All-Star Game 1 year later was somber compared to the 20 before it, as the days before the game were tragic. On January 14th, 1968, 2 days before the game, Bill Masterton had been checked by 2 Oakland Seals players and died from his on-ice injuries. The game itself was overshadowed by the debate of whether helmets should be worn in the NHL and the fallout of Masterton's untimely death. As in the previous years, the All-Stars were represented by the first and second All-Star teams, as well as enough players so that each team were represented. The East-West format of future All-Star games was announced at this game with the intention of being able to move the game anywhere, alternating home ice between an East Division team and a West Division team year after year. The idea, along with the notion that the players chosen from the 2 All-Star teams should be the best at the time of the game rather than the best of the players from the season before, quickly gained popularity, although the Cup champions reserved the right to host the 22nd All-Star game, which was this one. The St. Louis Blues became the first Western hosts of the All-Star game the following year. And then the 26th All-Star game was the first in which the game MVP received a car as a prize. But back to this guy briefly. He is the last known player to die during an NHL game.
Any NHL?
NHL game. Because of his death, it became mandatory for helmets, although the last player to not wear a helmet played into 1997. It was grandfathered in. Mm-hmm. With the alignment of the NHL into 4 divisions for the 1974-75 All-Star season, this 1975 NHL All-Star game was the first to pit the Wales Conference against the Campbell Conference. Do not like those names myself.
What do those names even mean?
So they're named after two former executives in NHL. So Clarence Campbell so Clarence Campbell, and the other one was named for the Prince of Wales at the time.
Oh, I thought the animals, a camel and a whale.
No. Campbell, like the soup, and
Oh,
Wales, like Wales.
whale. Yeah, I got that. I didn't need it explained.
Yeah. In 1978, amid renewed interest in international hockey, the NHL decided to replace the 1979 All-Star Game with a three-game series where the league's top players played against the Soviet Union's top players in the Challenge Cup held at Madison Square Garden in New York City. The Challenge Cup was touted as a miniature world championship, and for the first time, fans could vote for certain members of the roster. The NHL would lose the three-game series 2-1, with the third game being lost by an embarrassing 6-0 margin. Over the next few, sorry,
In whose favor?
Russia.
Hmm.
That was when North America started realizing, oh shit, Russia's good at hockey.
Yeah. No shit. These people literally live on ice.
There is a really good documentary on the Soviet Union Red Army hockey team out there called Red Army. They ran it like a military.
Like they do most everything.
Yeah. Over the next few years, various aspects of the All-Star Game came under scrutiny again, including the format of the game. To make things worse, the All-Star Game itself was viewed in some circles as a bad thing, with players opting out of the game in favor of the rest and prospective hosts repeatedly declining to host the event. With the geographical realignment of the NHL for the 1981-82 season, the 1982 NHL All-Star Game was the first between the Wales and the Campbell conferences, like I mentioned earlier, with the 37th All-Star Game in 1985 marked the first time that honorary captains were selected for each team. The game, so basically they would choose celebrities. Yeah. The game also brought forth the notion of fan balloting of the starting lineup, already adopted in the NBA, and by this time had returned following a hiatus brought on by ballot box stuffing to baseball. So apparently baseball had a controversy there. And the NFL gave fans the right to vote in the 90s. Because the game itself was suffering from having little media coverage. So the idea came into fruition the following year. In 1987, the All-Star Game was preempted in favor of Rendezvous 87, held at Le Colisée in Quebec City. Like the Challenge Cup before it, Rendezvous 87 was an event where the best the NHL could offer played against a Soviet squad, which had an entire year to prepare. To reduce the possibility of the NHL being embarrassed again, Rendezvous 87 was a two-game affair. The series was split between the two teams with a game won by each. During the series, NHL President John Ziegler stated that Soviet players would never be able to join the NHL because of the way the Soviet hockey program worked, and that NHLers would never be able to play in the Winter Olympics. Soviet players would be allowed to play in the NHL within 3 years, and an arrangement that would allow NHL players to play in the Olympics was announced within 9. The 41st NHL All-Star Game in 1990 was held on a Sunday after having been held on Tuesdays since 1968. On that edition, the NHL All-Star Skills Competition and Heroes of Hockey game were both introduced. The Heroes of Hockey game featured NHL alumni and was set up much like the main game with Wales versus Campbell. Many of these players retired before the introduction of the Wales and Campbell conferences. Future Heroes of Hockey games would have the hometown alumni play against the best of the rest, much like the All-Star games of old. The 42nd NHL All-Star Game, pictured here, introduced as part of the player selection 2 players chosen by the commissioner to honor their years to their game. All right. With the renaming of the conferences and divisions again onto a geographical basis this time for the 93-94 season, the 1994 All-Star Game was the first between the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference in name since 1974, although the Wales versus Campbell format pitted East versus West anyways. They just changed the name. Now, this introduces my favorite NHL All-Star jerseys. So this is what the Western Conference jerseys look like. This is what the Eastern Conference jerseys look like.
I'm not seeing too much of a difference, just the color.
That's the point. Your colors are supposed to differentiate, but it's the design because it's actually a star.
It looks more like the Canadian maple leaf.
No, it's actually a star. If you hold out your arms, it makes a star. And then this design was actually later adapted in 1999 by the Dallas Stars.
For that. Can I see the other one again?
Yep.
That also looks like a star.
It is a star.
So you said that the Eastern one is your favorite, right?
No. I said these sets of jerseys are my favorite of the All-Star.
Oh, okay. So both.
Yeah,
okay.
because I got some doozies coming up here for jerseys.
Oh no.
Yeah. Or was I? The All-Star game in 1995, unfortunately, was a casualty of the 94-95 NHL lockout, which shortened that season to just 48 games. San Jose, the original scheduled venue, was instead awarded the 97 All-Star game. In the interim, Boston held the 96 All-Star game. Now, the 1997 All-Star game has one of the most famous goals, that is this gif. Owen Nolan coming in on a breakaway, pointing and scoring exactly where he pointed to score a hat trick. In his hometown, because he was in San Jose and he was playing for the Sharks. Now, this All-Star game, the 1998 All-Star game, is actually my first one as a fan, and not because it was in Vancouver. It was the year I started watching hockey. The 1998 NHL All-Star Game featured the first change in format in years in an attempt to promote the first Olympic hockey tournament with participation from NHL players. From 1998 to 2002, a team of North American All-Stars feasted a team of non-North American All-Stars known as the World All-Stars. Some cities suggested replacing the game with a miniature national tournament in the style of the World Cup of Hockey. Some fans were unhappy with a team consisting of 75% players being labeled as North American. The first international showdown, as was billed, resulted in the North American All-Stars winning 8-7. And this is, so every year the jerseys somewhat change, but this is, my opinion, the worst one from that era.
I'm still not,
This is from the year 2000. This is when everyone was trying to we're going millennium with all our jersey designs.
I'm still not seeing what's so bad about it. I mean, it's a jersey.
It's weird design. So the world players, instead of the name being above the numbers, the names are below. The players and the goalies wore different colored jerseys, which is why there's a white and a red one. The red was for the players, the white was for the goalies.
Okay.
It was very weird. It doesn't look good on the ice, in my opinion.
You say so.
And I do. I'm the hockey authority here.
Yeah. I mean, fashion's never really been my strong suit, so
neither is mine.
The hell do I know?
The 2003 games format was reverted back to the classic East versus West format. Denny Heatley scored 4 goals, tying an All-Star game record, in addition to recording a shootout goal. Heatley also set the record for being the youngest player to score a hat trick in the All-Star game, a record previously held by Edmonton Oilers' Wayne Gretzky. The shootout, the first of its kind in the
name.
Sorry?
I heard that name.
Yeah. This shootout, the first of its kind in the NHL in the modern era, received an enthusiastic, frenzied response from the crowd when it was announced and carried on during the event. This was influential in the later decision to decide regular season games tied after overtime with a shootout, thus eliminating ties. And this actually like this jersey. This is the 2003 All-Star jersey.
Okay. It does look a little better than the other one, I'll say that.
The All-Star game was dealt 2 serious blows in 2005. Not only was the game canceled along with the rest of the season as a result of the 2004-2005 lockout, but the subsequent collective bargaining agreement that ended the lockout stipulated that heretofore the game would be held only in non-Olympic years. Thus, there was no All-Star game held during the 2005-2006 season either, because there was Olympics in Turin or Italy that year.
What lockout? What was
so that? The players who are unionized striked. That's what the lockout was. They went on strike. Okay. Yeah.
I need the context for these things.
So there's been 3, and I've been a fan during 2 of them. After a 2-season absence, the 2007 game was played in Dallas, where the West defeated the East 12-9. Daniel Briere of the Buffalo Sabres scored a goal and 4 assists and was named the game's MVP. The Atlanta Thrashers hosted the 2008 game, as they had originally been scheduled to host the canceled game in 2005. The Eastern Conference won the game 8-7 on a late game-winning goal by Mark Savard with 20.9 seconds remaining in the game. In 2009, the Bell Center, the home of the Montreal Canadiens, hosted the All-Star Game, as well as the 2009 NHL entry draft, which is where they draft the rookies. In the game, the Eastern Conference defeated the Western Conference 12-11 in a shootout. Approximately 21,000 people attended the game.
Shootout?
Yep, the game went to a shootout.
There was a shooting match in there?
No. Okay, so what a shootout is, so it was, I did mention earlier with 2003, but what a shootout is, so you play your full game, your 3 periods, game's tied, you go into overtime for 5 minutes. Now, if that's still tied at the end of that, you go into what's known as a shootout, where each team sends out a player to go one-on-one with the goalie, and the first to score the most goals in 3 attempts, the first team to score more goals in 3 attempts wins the game. If they're still tied, they keep going until somebody scores.
Okay.
During the playoffs.
You gotta realize I'm not a sports fan. You can't just throw these concepts at my face. You gotta explain what those mean.
Well, I'm glad that you're stopping me and asking me. Otherwise,
if there's something you just explaining, I did. What?
If we did that for everything, I think we'd be here a long time.
Thankfully, that I don't pause for everything.
Yeah. Approximately 21,000 people attended the game, where then Canadian Alexei Kovalev, who is the guy in the red here.
They're all wearing red.
While the one on the left are primarily white.
Okay.
Alexei Kovalev, the captain there, was the Eastern Conference captain and was named the game's MVP after scoring 2 goals and 1 assist, as well as the shootout winner. Montreal fans voted Kovalev into the starting lineup in addition to teammates Andrei Markov, Carey Price, and Mike Komisarek. The Canadiens were picked to host both events because the Montreal Canadiens team celebrated its 100th anniversary that year. The team was established in 1909 as a founding member of the National Hockey Association, which became the NHL in 1917. A small number of players questioned their potential participation in 2009. Past and current All-Stars must obtain an excused absence, often relating to an injury or personal circumstances, by the league if they will not participate. If this approved absence is not obtained, 1 regular season game suspension is possible, and that has actually happened quite a few times. There was no NHL All-Star game in 2010 because of both a change to the union contract and 2010 also being an Olympic year. The 2010 Winter Olympics marked the first time that the Olympics had been hosted in an NHL market since the league allowed its players to compete in the Olympics. Almost done. 2011 All-Star Game was played in Raleigh, North Carolina, home of the Carolina Hurricanes. Gary Bettman announced at the RBC Center, which is an arena, that the game would be held in Raleigh in the Phoenix. Don't need that.
Was that part of your notes?
No. I just have something in there. I don't know if it's actually relevant. Oh, never mind. Okay, actually it is. The Phoenix Coyotes were originally slated to host the game that year in replacement of the 2006 game, which they had again originally been awarded before the NHL ultimately decided not to hold the game that year. Amid fears that the Coyotes franchise would not right its ship by February 2021 because they were having owners issues, which went on for years, very, very not pretty. Amid fears that the Coyotes franchise would not, quote-unquote, right its ship by February 2021, however, the cities of Pittsburgh, Raleigh, and Ottawa rose as candidates for that game, with Raleigh eventually being chosen, having been promised the game since the Hurricanes reached 12,000 season ticket sales earlier in the decade. The 2011 game also introduced a new format, which I personally enjoyed, replacing the traditional conference teams with a fantasy draft. Fans voted for 6 players from each conference, 3 forwards, 2 defensemen, and 1 goaltender, while the NHL selected another 36 players for a total of 42 players. The chosen players were then selected 2 captains for each All-Star team, who then selected their teammates in a draft. What was good about this was one of the stars was one of the last players chosen, and it was just funny to see him there all by himself. The 2012 All-Star Game repeated the fantasy draft format as well. The 2013 NHL All-Star Game the 2016 The 2013 All-Star Game was originally scheduled for January 27th in Columbus, Ohio, the home of the Blue Jackets. However, the game is postponed to 2015, first due to the 2013 NHL lockout, which delayed the start of that season, followed by the inability to play in 2014 due to it falling on an Olympic Games year. So that game was officially played in 2015. The 2016 NHL All-Star Game, which is another fun one, was played on January 31st, 2016 in Nashville, the home of the Nashville Predators. The format was changed so that no longer a singular All-Star game per se. Instead, 4 All-Star teams, each representing one of the league's 4 divisions, participate in a 2-round knockout tournament, with each game being 2 10-minute halves in length and played with 3 skaters on each team. So basically 3-on-3 hockey. In addition, each division is required to select at least one player from all 8 of its teams. Prior to 2017, the Central and Pacific divisions only had 7 teams, both added an 8th team as of 2021. Unlike in previous years where some teams were not represented in the All-Star games, which not really cool. Okay, now this is what makes this game noticeable. This is one that actually will live on in fans' minds for years. The 2016 game also is noticeable for the appearance of John Scott, who's the guy on the shoulders there. A journeyman enforcer who was voted into the game through the fan vote. Scott, who had been demoted to the NHL All-Star Game after the vote, played as a member of no team and as captain of the Pacific Division, scored 2 goals after scoring none the entire regular season up to that point, and won the game's most popular player award, the MVP award. Now, the NHL changed the rules after this, so a situation like this can never happen again. Because great story for John Scott, love it, but in reality, he's not an all-star. But again,
why not?
Because he didn't play much minutes on the ice. He was primarily known for fighting. Most teams would pick other players before him. It was just mostly fans wanting a good story, and they did.
Okay. Well, they're happy.
Yeah, of course. Like I said, it's a great moment, but I understand why the NHL made it so this won't happen again. The 27 NHL All-Star Game was played on January 29, 2017 in Los Angeles to honor the Kings' 50th anniversary. The 2018 All-Star Game was then played in...
Which King?
Sorry?
You said King.
The LA Kings.
Oh, okay.
Los Angeles Kings. The 2018 All-Star Game was then played in Tampa, Florida, using the same device. What they did here was all the 4 jerseys were designed using colors from the team's past. Same thing repeated itself in Tampa in 2018. The 2019 was hosted by San Jose again. First game to be held on a Saturday after many years of being playing on a Sunday. Yeah, I don't need those 2. Basically, originally the 2021 NHL All-Star Game was be hosted by the Florida Panthers, which, however, due to COVID-19 the conclusion of the season was delayed to September and postponed the start of the following season. The All-Star Game was canceled with the possibility of moving the festivities to 2022 at the earliest. The league said that it would consider changing the upcoming NHL All-Star Games format so that it would have a more distinct international flavor using a model similar to the World Cup of Hockey. Spoilers, didn't happen. And then finally, on June 28th, 2021, the league announced that the 2022 All-Star Game would be held in Paradise, Nevada, home of the Las Vegas Golden Knights. The league cited the fact that they had not signed a deal with the International Olympic Committee on sending players to the 2022 Olympics, so they decided to schedule an All-Star Game anyways at an arena in Western North America to shorten travel to China if players did go. On September 3rd, a deal was officially reached to send players to the Olympics with an opt-out clause should COVID-19 health conditions worsen. However, on December 22nd, the NHL announced that it would not send its players to the Olympics due to COVID, an increasing number of postponed games. Yeah. And then there's the last year's NHL All-Star Game. I want to bring up these jerseys because they went retro and they brought back my favorite jerseys, but with different colors.
Okay.
Because they're in Florida.
Oh, the star thing, yeah.
Yeah. Now you see the star, right?
Yep.
Okay. And then brings us to this year's NHL All-Star Game where we find out Michael Bublé was on shrooms during the NHL draft, and Justin Bieber is the celebrity co-captain for one of his teams. So, and you know who's there's one lady, unfortunately, I don't know who she is, but the other captain, Will Arnett. And that brings the end to my topic because my voice is dying. Any questions?
Hockey.
Okay, then.
Any questions I might have had, I already asked during the thing.
Well, what is your topic for next week, then, my friend?
So, which month are we in?
The second month, February.
Also known as. You really shouldn't take that long to think about it.
Passover?
Are you also on true? What?
No, I'm trying to think what would fall in February for you guys.
Not necessarily for us guys, but generally.
Well, I know February is Black History Month.
Yes. Should have started with that.
I didn't know that's where you were going to go.
What else can you be associate? Can you associate February with?
I don't know what you guys do on your side of the world.
Never mind. Okay, never mind. So, sadly, this Black History Month started on the wrong foot with the passing of Carl Weathers, of course. But in honor of Black History Month, did you know? Do you know that not all Jews are white? Did you know that?
Well, yeah, that I knew. Yeah,
because many people don't for some reason, and they're using that in their propaganda. So
there's a Jewish tribe in Ethiopia that people think are actually have the last Ark of the Covenant. So
yeah, but again, it's shocking how many people think that all Jews are white and all Jews are white supremacists. So I figured to educate some people and honor Black History Month, I figured that for next week we should just talk about the Ethiopian migration to Israel. And there have been several waves of Ethiopian migration since the 70s and all the way up to the 2020s, believe it or not. And there's a large, huge Ethiopian population in Israel of Black Ethiopian Jews. So we're going to briefly discuss the various different waves of Jewish Ethiopian migration into Israel. And for a fun bonus, we're just going to go over a few notable celebrity Black Jews, or rather, celebrity Black Israelis, because here's another thing you probably didn't know. Not all famous Black Israelis are Jewish.
I thought we were actually talking about Sammy Davis Jr., but he converted.
We're going to specifically talk about more the Israeli side.
Which I'm looking forward to that, because I'm looking forward to see who is and who isn't.
You're probably not going to recognize most of these.
Probably not. I'm definitely looking forward to this, because a lot of scholars, not a lot of scholars, but there's definitely a belief among scholars that the Ethiopian Jews are the lost tribe of Israel.
There is no lost tribe of Israel. Get off that boat. There's only 12 tribes. There is no lost tribe of Israel. I don't know where you keep shoving that fan theory into things.
It's not a fan theory.
I've never heard of it, and neither does anyone I know. And also, I looked it up. I couldn't find any evidence of a lost tribe of Israel beyond just
no. It's a myth.
Yeah, it's a myth.
Yeah,
there is no lost tribe of Israel.
That's why I said scholars believe. They didn't say scholars.
Scholars believe in a myth.
Yeah, they believe in what it is, but there's no proof. Well, I mean, there's evidence.
All right. I honestly, I never heard of the lost tribe of Israel before I met you.
Really?
Yes.
Because
I've always known that there to be 12 tribes.
Right. So this is from Wikipedia. So take with it from what you will. The 10 lost tribes were the 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel that were said to have been exiled.
Well, I mean, if you're talking about the 10 tribes,
yeah, that's what I'm referring to.
All right, fine.
Yeah,
but they're the Sumerians, which actually came back after the Cyrus Declaration. They're not lost. They just mingled.
Okay.
With other tribes in the area. They're not lost. They're Sumerians or Samaritans, depending on who you ask. Anyways, so next week we're just going to talk about the various different migrations, which still, by the way, happened all the way up to 2020, which I was a little shocked to find out. And of course, like I said, hold on, should probably uh, bring up this picture while I'm at it. Give me a second. We're gonna talk about some famous, notable, well, famous in Israel, I should say, but famous Black Israelis. Bla- yep, famous Black Israelis, particularly Black Jews.
I see the saxophone there. I appreciate.
Yep, I knew you'd like it.
All right.
So
So
plugs.
yeah, let's do the plugs. So you can find me on my personal Instagram and Twitter at soda_the_saxman. And of course, doing my usual shenanigans here with 50 and watching the NHL All-Star game this afternoon.
Hey, how convenient and relevant to the show.
Yep.
You can find me looking for Lost Tribes of Israel online. But also, when I'm not doing that, you can find me hopefully every Thursday on this show with my good friend Soda, and hopefully every Monday, and if not, then Tuesday on the greatest show in the galaxy, talking about the greatest show in the galaxy, Doctor Who, and I talk even more Doctor Who on my own YouTube channel, 50 Shades of Geek. I do weekly reviews of every single Doctor Who episode from 1963 all the way to 2023, and I just uploaded a month late my 2023 year recap video, which is really a lot of fun. It took me way too long to finish it, but at least I finally got it out of the way. And you can also check out all the other wonderful channels from the wider Benverse at large, like Something to Talk About, Galaxy Geeks, Multiverse of Geekdom, Movie Lovers Unite, The Midnight Cinema, 8-Time Reviews, In the Front Row, and is So Digging Wrestling still around? The thing? All right. You tried. So, and that's it for us. And should I play the outro? Do you play the outro? Because you keep forgetting it.
Yeah, you do it.
All right. So until next week, just remember, all of us, we're doing this for this guy, for the love of our good friend Ben, who's already been well over a year since his passing, and we miss him every day. And it's also been over a year since we did the big stream for him.
Yep.
So, yeah. Just noticed that. Yeah, remember, if you're whether you're a hockey fan or a Lost Tribe person, always remember to let your geek flag fly. That's all we're really here for. So goodbye and enjoy your All-Star game, sir.
I will.